All right. Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Office Hours. Excited this week. We do have one of our mentors as a guest. It is Cari Sultanik. Cari, you're in Philadelphia, correct?
Normally. At the moment, I'm in Boston, but Philadelphia is home.
Okay, awesome. And Cari is a senior digital marketing strategist at IBM, but has 20 plus years of experience in marketing and everything from agencies to operating as an independent consultant. So first of all, Cari, thank you for being here and chatting with us.
My pleasure.
Why don't we start just by digging into sort of your career path a little bit, just to give our students some context, and then as we go from there, I certainly have a series of questions for you, but this is really about all the students that are here today. So if you have questions, feel free to jump in at any time. But to start, why don't you tell us a little bit just about your current role, Cari?
Sure. So what I do now at IBM is I work with, I am part of corporate headquarters, and IBM, being the large company that they are, has lots of different business units. And a few years ago, I was working for a company that was acquired by IBM, and we were jumping just at that point into a huge digital transformation project. So my current boss pulled me away from where I was to help with that. And so what I do is I work with marketers all over the world to help them conceive of and design and spec out and ultimately optimize their digital marketing campaigns.
Very cool. And how did you find yourself working in marketing, or more specifically digital marketing, in the first place? Where did your career path sort of start?
Sure. So I have a really sort of convoluted background. I started off as an elementary school teacher with a psychology degree,
Okay.
which didn't really work for me especially well for various reasons. So I started working for a company that would pay for me to go back to school, and I went back to school for my MBA. And that's when I discovered that I loved marketing. And I worked my way into a marketing role at the credit card company I was working for at the time. And I'm going to date myself here, but it was all direct mail. So I ended up in digital marketing sort of right in the middle of the dot-com boom. And some of the people that I had worked with had moved on to a startup and came back to me to recruit me, because the skills that you acquire in direct mail translate very nicely to digital marketing. And at the time, there wasn't anybody with any experience in digital marketing. So I got to jump in really head first into a really blue sky kind of scenario.
Very cool. I think one of the things that the students in this program are struggling with, or at least need to start thinking about early on in the curriculum, is not just within digital marketing what type of role they're interested in, but what type of work environment they want to end up in, be it a product-focused company versus an agency versus acting as an independent consultant. What advice would you have for students who are trying to figure out which of those environments might be the best home for them?
That's a great question. And I can tell you that I've done all of those things. I've worked for small companies, mid-sized companies, obviously a super large company, and also independently. And what I would say is, it's actually surprising to me that I'm going to say this, but I did not love working in the agency world, but that's where I learned the most. So what you experience in an agency situation is rapid completion, lots of exposure to different kinds of companies and projects and initiatives and things like that. And you really kind of end up learning a little bit of everything, especially if you're in an account management role, because you have to be able to coordinate all those other areas, from creative to content to analysis to paid search and all of those things. So if you're really just starting out and you're just getting your feet wet with digital marketing, I would say the agency route is a fast track.
Sure.
But at the same time, if you're not the kind of person who loves to track your hours and you want to be able to dig into a project and see it all the way through and own it, then you might be better off at a company that isn't an agency. And in that case, I would say aim for smaller to mid-size at the beginning of your career so that you can really build up your skills.
That makes sense to me. One more question for you, and then we'll turn it over to the students to see if they have anything to say. The question I have for you now is, so it sounds like you're working with people all over the world and sort of helping train marketers around the globe at this point, but if you reflect back on yourself as an individual contributor, what are your strengths as a marketer, and what are the things that you feel you're really good at and you get excited about?
I would say my favorite thing in the entire world as it relates to digital marketing is A/B testing. I grew up as the daughter of a scientist, so I pretty much learned the concept of like randomized controlled double-blind studies when I was still in diapers. But what thrills me about digital marketing is that you have to be part scientist, and you have to be able to think about what can you test, what's your hypothesis, how do you analyze it, and then what are you going to do when you get your results? How do you move forward, and then what do you test next? So I'd say that's my strongest area of interest. From a skill set standpoint, I'm really great at thinking through the entire campaign strategy. So who is your target audience? What is your value prop? What is the story you're trying to tell? What content are you going to use to tell it? And then how are you going to wire that all together in some sort of logical way so that you can guide your customers through a journey that will make sense and bring them to the point where they convert into revenue? Because at the end of the day, it's all about the revenue. So that kind of end-to-end vision is really my sweet spot. I don't dig too deep into hands-on with tools. So I have in the past done email from creation to deployment to analysis and all that. I've dabbled a little bit in some paid search and social and things like that, but I don't too much get into the tools anymore.
Sounds good. Thanks for sharing so much context. For those of you that are on the other end of the line, did this stir any thoughts or any initial questions for Cari?
Yes, I have a question. First of all, I do agree that you're great. Yay! But my question is, salary aside, if you took that off the table, and I know you said your favorite thing to do is A/B testing, but what was your favorite job title, like your favorite actual job that you've had in your career of digital marketing?
So that's a great question. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
If I'm being completely honest, I would take myself all the way back to my digital marketing roots. I worked for a small startup and I was just a marketing manager. So my job at the time was to kind of figure out what needed to be done and do it. This was in the very beginning of the internet world. So I devised email campaigns. I figured out how to gather names. There wasn't so much of a spam issue then, so we kind of maybe did some things that weren't necessarily okay, but they were then. And then we would watch results come in. And one of the things I was thinking about as I was preparing for this session is one of the things that made it so fun is we didn't know how things would turn out. So for example, we would send out an email with a discount code, and then we could all see the results coming in, and we could see the referring URLs. And the referring URLs with the discount codes were overwhelmingly coming from this one site that, I don't know if it still exists, but it was called Flamingo World. And they were basically scraping offer codes from different companies' emails and then putting it together into this website where then they would sell ad space, and that's how they monetized it. But we were like, hey, this is great. Let's go directly to them and offer them a better deal. So it was kind of very entrepreneurial. We got our hands wet in affiliate marketing and in email and in analytics and in, some rudimentary testing and things like that. And I really like that kind of environment because it challenges you to think and collaborate and try things. And one of the things that I'm a real proponent of is I will always try to work for a company that tolerates failure. And by that, I mean, I believe in trying things, even if you don't know that they're going to work. You try it, you evaluate it, you fail fast, you move forward, and you learn from it. If you go in to look at a company and they're very regimented and they're not open to experimentation and failure, you might find yourself in a little more of a box than you're comfortable in if you, like me, like to try new things and learn from your experiences.
Thank you. That was a great answer.
You're welcome.
Anybody else with a particular question?
I'll ask. So I know that split testing and A/B marketing and stuff like that, as far as specialties are concerned, just kind of from what I've gathered from the curriculum and also from another call that we had, was that that kind of a specialty would usually be bundled together with something like paid search. Are there like any specific or other job titles that you could think of that might be where you might be able to find something entry level that actually focuses a lot on A/B testing and split testing?
I think what you're going to find at an entry level is that you're going to have to create those opportunities, right? So there may not be a protocol for A/B testing, for example, for your landing pages or for your emails. But if you go in with your eyes wide open and look for opportunities to do that, and you're in a company that's receptive to that kind of testing and experimentation, you'll create those opportunities for yourself. And it's funny, what I found in my career is like the things that you find interesting and you dive into, whether it's part of your job description or not, those tend to be the things that take your career in a new direction and you end up going with them. So if it's something that's interesting to you and it's not a part of the job description, as long as you're in the right environment, you can make it your job.
Oh, thank you. That's a great answer. And I also agree that you're totally great. And I'm so glad.
Oh, thank you. I promise I didn't tell them they had to do that.
I didn't even know you were going to be on today until Katarina emailed me. I was like, oh my God. I mean, I was there anyway, but I didn't realize we were having a special one.
I'm so happy.
They're all special, but.
Cari, I have a question specific to conversion rate optimization and A/B testing. In the curriculum for this course, we teach Optimizely, and I've spoken a little bit about some A/B tests and conversion rate experiments that I've run in startups that I've worked at. But coming from a company like IBM, a company of that size, what does A/B testing and conversion optimization look like within that context?
Strangely enough, we also use Optimizely.
Okay.
The tool that I was most familiar with to begin with, that I used in previous companies as well. It's a really neat tool. It's really easy for marketers to run tests without involving developers once all the code is installed where it needs to be.
Sure.
And then for email testing, I would say that tends to be, as much as I'd like to say we have a really sophisticated email testing engine at IBM, we don't. So that tends to be more ad hoc, and we handle that in the bowels of our marketing automation system, which is, for the record, the largest one in the world. And so that was a big piece of our marketing transformation, was really digging into how do we take the technology available to marketers and help them understand how to leverage it to optimize their campaigns. So some of that happens within the marketing automation tool as it relates to email and testing content and things like that. And then when you're talking about landing pages and web pages themselves and things like that, that tends to happen in Optimizely.
Got it. And you mentioned the marketing automation tool you're using is the largest in the world. Is that a homegrown system, or are you using another publicly available tool?
It's a product that IBM acquired a number of years ago, maybe 7-8 years ago, and still sells today, called Unica.
Okay.
We don't call it that internally. We have to come up with some other acronym that we use, which changes often. Acronyms are like a problem in the digital marketing world. Just whatever. If you don't know what an acronym means, just ask, because you are probably asking somebody who needed to know at some point in the past too. But yeah, so Unica is the largest marketing automation system in the world, and we have the largest deployment of it. And so our project was to take the entire company and move it to this new platform, but then we had to really teach marketers how to work within that new framework. It was very different.
Understood. And sticking with the CRO theme, can you give us an example of an A/B test or just a conversion optimization experiment that you've run at IBM or another company, just to give us a flavor of what your hypothesis was and sort of how you structured the test?
Yeah, sure. So one of my favorite ones that I ever ran was at the company that I was working for that IBM acquired. It was called FiberLink, and we sold mobile device management software. So it's a SaaS-based product. And we had a really good marketing engine that would bring people in from first contact through to a trial. We had a 30-day trial product. But then once they got to trial, we had an issue with them dropping off to conversion to a paid customer, which is kind of important. So what we did, was we designed a nurture campaign just for trials. So spaced out every couple of days with, here, try this. Now that you've gotten to do this, try this. Now that, that kind of thing. And at first we couldn't get the data in to read whether or not they had, there's a first step to the trial where you have to do something. And we couldn't read whether or not they had done that. So every email went out saying, do this first, and then do this, and then do this. But I pushed really hard. And once we got the data, we split test that first email. Everybody who had done that thing, we split tested them off into a different stream that said, great, you're hitting the ground running. Here are 4 more things to try, blah, blah, blah. And then we kept half of that population out and sent them the original email that said, first do this, then do this, then do this. So for the path of customers who had done that first thing and had gotten that alternative email that we were trying out, our conversion rate to paid was 50% higher, which is a huge return.
It's a strong example of personalization of experience mattering.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to, at the end of the day, when you're a digital marketer, your job is to try to have a conversation with a prospect. And to the extent that you can acknowledge anything that you know about the prospect to make that conversation more personal and direct and fruitful and relevant to them, the more successful you'll be in reaching your goals.
Makes sense. So let's switch gears a little bit. Most of the students in this program are here for the same reason. They're ultimately hoping to get a job out of this experience. They're all here to further their education and really looking for a leg up on other folks that are looking for digital marketing jobs. When you've been hiring digital marketing jobs across the spectrum in the past, what are the things that really stood out to you, or what can our students do to make them stand out as candidates against all the other applicants?
Yeah, so I would say, for one thing, taking this course will definitely make you stand out because it demonstrates a concerted effort to gain knowledge and experience that others don't have, which to me means an awful lot. I grew up in a family of educators, and I feel like if you seek education, you're 100 steps ahead of the person who's just sitting on the couch. When it comes to, I'm going to skip right to the interview. When it comes to the interview, what I'm looking for, I can see on your resume what skills you claim to have, and 9 times out of 10, I believe them because most of the time I find out that they're true, and so that's my experience. But what I'm looking for is, what's your attitude? Do you have an entrepreneurial mindset? Do you like to learn things? Do you accept things as they are, or do you push the boundaries and go for more? And I'll ask that. I'll get those answers by experiential questions. So I'll never ask you, well, what do you think you would do if such and such happened? What I'll do is I'll say, tell me about a time when you were working on something that utterly failed. What did you do? How did it turn out? And it could be related to work, or it could not be related to work. But what I'm looking for is, how did you understand that there was a problem to begin with? What was your emotional response to that? And then what did you do about it? And how did that turn out? Because that tells me everything I need to know about your mindset in a fast-paced environment, which digital marketing always is. I don't care what industry you're in, it's always fast. So that's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. So I would think about, as you're getting ready to interview, or even, have informational interviews with people in the field, think about what you've done, whether it's in digital marketing or not, that can translate into conveying that mindset to someone who's interviewing you. That's what I'm always looking for.
Makes sense. I'm going to pause here again for a moment. Do we have any other student questions?
I have an interview question, and it kind of just trails along the end of what you were just saying, Cari. So let's say you have someone and you're interviewing them, and they have a bold personality. Is there a level of boldness that you think where that becomes, where confidence meets cocky, and that becomes, where that would turn you off instead of making you feel like they're a go-getter or, solution-oriented?
Yeah, so I always say there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And so I always kind of assume that I have something to learn from everyone. I don't care if you have 30 years of experience or 3 minutes of experience. There's something I can learn from you. So I like to see people who expect to be able to learn something too. So you want to project your expertise, but also be able to humbly acknowledge the areas where you could use a little more work and guidance. It's kind of a careful navigation, and you have to be able to read the interviewer a little bit. One way to do that is if going into the interview, you've thoroughly reviewed that person's background, like on LinkedIn or whatever, when they say, hey, do you have any questions for me? You can say, yeah, I see you have a lot of experience with paid search, and you've had a lot of success in that area. That's something that I haven't worked as much on. So if I were to find myself in this role, would that be something that you would be able to mentor me on so I can improve my skills too? That kind of thing shows an interest in learning and a little bit of a humbleness around the areas that aren't necessarily your top strength, I would say.
That makes sense. So it's kind of a balance, a combination, and deferring to them does make a lot of sense, because I think it's like sometimes you're in the middle of the interview and you want to convey that, like, hey, I'm confident, but I'm coachable.
Yeah.
But you don't want to just come out and say that.
Yeah, I think the best way to handle that is when you get to the part where you get to ask them questions, unless it's come up in some other way before. But people like, interviewers are just people, and they want to find the right person for the job too. So they're nervous too. They're looking to get the right person, and you're looking to find the right position. So, a little bit of a tip of the hat to what their skill set is never hurts.
That makes sense.
In a genuine way.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'd like to edify them without being too obvious.
Right. You don't want to be like, butt kissing for the sake of it. If there's something that they do that you'd like to learn more about, then expressing interest in that is a way to do that.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Sanjeet, you have a question?
I do actually, yes. So I'm currently, as I'm taking this program, working on my MBA and learning a lot as well. So I'm trying to put the two together. And what I'm learning from that side is obviously data is a big thing. Now, have you found that if someone has some extra emphasis on on data science or data mining, that's playing a stronger role in the job market now? Coined with digital marketing.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. In fact, I have a son who's in college who just decided he was going to major in marketing, and I swear there was no pressure for me. But I did say, let me take a look at the courses that you have to choose from, because he's a very mathematical kind of kid. I'm like, if you can pick up analytics and really understand that world, you can really differentiate yourself. So I would say yes, and especially if you're interested in something in that realm, in the analytics realm. Digital marketing is all about the data in, data out. And one of the things that I talked to one of my mentees about quite a bit, he was really concerned about, if I learn how to use Google Analytics, what if I don't know how to use the tool that they have at this other company or whatever? And you probably know this better than I do, but when it comes to data, the most important thing isn't necessarily if you can manipulate the data, but if you can conceive of what questions can I ask of the data? What do I want to know? And how can I use data to get me that answer? And whether or not you can manipulate those software packages yourself or those numbers yourself, or who to work with to do that. The most important skill is being able to think analytically. So if you're augmenting your digital marketing education with any kind of focus on analytics in your MBA, I think that will set you apart.
Okay, cool, thanks. And I guess the other question is, I guess this kind of goes to the first question is, any trends you have a lot of experience you've seen over the years, how that's changed, any trends you've seen that, digital marketing is going to, so that way, as someone takes the Springboard class, they'll be able to kind of etch away at certain things and emphasize those?
Yeah, let me think about that. It's a really good question, because digital marketing changes by nature all the time. Like literally this week, the job could be different than it was last week. So I think I would say a lot of people want to sort of jump over the strategic piece and just get into the brass tacks. And if that's kind of where you want to focus your career, there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think that there's a much bigger sense of what the customer journey is. And the word journey is way overused, but I'm going to use it because that's what people use. There's a much bigger emphasis now on the customer journey and thinking about who is your customer, what do they know, what are their affinities, and where are they in the journey so that you can speak to them effectively. And then using digital marketing to make sure you're doing that. Whereas even 5 years ago, I don't think anybody really cared. They're like, you know what, we're going to put a 3-touch nurture stream, and that's what we're doing. But now there's so much more thought around, well, okay, if somebody converted on this reg page, that would indicate that they might be interested in this or this or this. So in this first email, I'm going to try to suss out which area they're interested in. I'm going to have 3 different calls to action, whichever one they click in on, for example. Now I'm going to take them off in some other direction because now I know what they're interested in. So I think that customer journey focus is a big piece of the puzzle. And even if I'm working on hiring somebody whose job it is to implement a digital marketing program, I want to know that they're thinking about that. That has to be at the heart of your digital marketing program.
Fantastic response. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other student questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I would like to know about what would be the first week of digital marketing. What would that look like for digital marketing? Let's say you were doing paid advertising for, let's say, an e-commerce company. What could be like the first 2 weeks or first month? What would that look like? Would I be required to get results quickly, or they'll have some time to wait?
Not usually. I mean, if it's an established program, usually you'll have time to meet with all of the stakeholders that you have to work with. Especially if you're doing digital, like media buys and stuff like that, you're going to have to understand what's the product, who's the target audience, what's the pace, how do people get creative to you, that kind of stuff. Are you working with an agency? Who do you have to meet with there? So I'd say the first 2 weeks are usually just a lot of meeting with people and gathering information. But the imperative to drive results happens pretty quickly after that. Like, you don't have 3 months. You probably have 4 to 6 weeks tops to show something.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Andre, building on that too, I think something I always advise is if you ever come across a company that is demanding that you drive a specific result, that is probably something of a red flag. With most digital marketing campaigns, you don't know what the result is going to be. I think the most important thing is that you inspire confidence by having a strategy in terms of how you're going to measure success and hypotheses that show logical trains of thought. And if you have those two things and you commit to optimization and iterating on your approach and measuring your progress throughout that entire experience, that's 90% of the battle, much more so than committing to a specific metric or set of metrics.
I agree with that. Good ad. Thanks.
Awesome. One more question from me, Cari. You strike me as someone who's passionate about digital marketing, who really enjoys the work that she does. What is it about this field that continues to excite you and sort of get you out of bed every morning, excited to go to work?
It's never the same. So I'm a novelty seeker by nature. I don't like anything to be static or the same. I want to get up and learn something or experience something different as often as I can. And digital marketing is the field for that. It's I've been in it for a crazy long time, since the mid-90s. It has never once been the same from one day to the next, and I don't anticipate it ever will be, because technology advances, what we know advances, what people test and learn, all of that. There's so many variables that can just change the job on a day-to-day basis, and it's never ever boring. I think it's fascinating.
Awesome. And if we have students on the line or elsewhere that now or down the road are interested in pursuing marketing roles at IBM, what's the best path for them?
I would love to tell them I can help them. I probably can't, although I could probably introduce people, but there's a global opportunity marketplace on the IBM website.
Okay.
There are 6 cities you have to be in to be a marketer, which I'm kind of exempted from at the moment, so don't count me, but it's Cambridge, New York, Atlanta, Raleigh, Austin, and San Francisco. So if you're in one of those cities and you want to be a marketer at IBM, check out the Global Opportunity Marketplace on the website. And if there's anything I can help to do to introduce you to a hiring manager, I'm happy to do that. So just reach out.
Awesome. I'm sure everybody appreciates that. And final question from me, just any final words of wisdom for the students, in this program, knowing they have a diverse range of interests and, paths forward, just as they look to build a career in digital marketing. Any final advice?
Yeah, be a scientist. So always be open to trying new things, learning new things. Don't get wrapped around the axle on what tools you're using, because you'll figure that out if you have the curiosity to learn something new and try something new. Just think bigger. Think about the strategy. Think about what you want to learn, and think about the ultimate result that you want. And the tools will come second. So be a scientist, be open, be tool agnostic, and always be curious about what you can do to push to the next level.
Great advice. Turn it back over to the students. Any final questions for Cari?
Hi, this is Sanjit. Any good books you recommend? Just in general in digital marketing, or the evolution of it, or anything like that, just to kind of get more insight and kind of take a break away from studying every once in a while.
Yeah, so I actually just started, 2 things. One is, if you've never read The Design of Everyday Things, you should totally read that. I know it's not so much marketing as it is user experience, but it still applies. And then the other one I just started reading, so I don't know how it's going to turn out exactly. I'm actually looking up the title right now. Is written by a professor at Columbia, and the book is called The Digital Transformation Playbook. And he talks about kind of a framework for how to think about digital transformation in an organization. So if you're working someplace where that kind of transformation is just happening, or it's new, or it hasn't happened yet, it's a great way to think about what is the framework for all of this, and what do you have to consider in order to make that a reality in your organization. So I think so far I find it really intriguing.
Cool, thank you. I'm on Amazon, so I'll purchase that very soon.
Good. Enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question, Cari. In your opinion, what's one thing that you feel is the future of digital marketing? Like one thing that would stand out, short term or long term, but that your opinion would be the future of digital marketing?
Well, I wouldn't profess to have a crystal ball, so I really don't know for sure. But I would say that, we're just sort of on the bleeding edge of understanding what data we can gather and how we can use it ethically and responsibly. So I think whatever the future looks like, it's going to involve more data and more ethical considerations around how to use that responsibly for the right purposes, and not for creepy purposes. I can't think of a better word.
So that's a great answer, and that makes a lot of sense. So just everything will continue to be more data driven, and in the hopes of customizing people's experience, or being able to send to them things that they're more likely to, or that much more likely to react to.
Right.
Okay,
right. In a way that they can perceive as helpful to them, and not, stalker-ish.
Right. Creepy is a good word for it. Yes.
That's the word I can think of at the moment.
Yes.
Awesome. Any final questions?
I just have one more, since you did bring up the design of everyday things. Can you talk a little bit about how UX design in general really blends into digital marketing, and what areas it's most important?
Yeah, so it actually dovetails nicely with A/B testing. I spent a lot of time studying landing page optimization and the usability of those landing pages and how the eye tracks. I worked for an agency for a little bit that did eye tracking and things like that. So being able to think through how does a human being interact with this thing, whatever this thing is, and where are their eyes likely to track, and what kinds of things are they likely to click on, and how does the length of text, have, people don't read big paragraphs, they read bullets and things like that. All of that kind of user experience kind of fundamentals feeds into, I think, what you're going to be looking at to test on your landing pages or your emails and things like that. So that's why I think it's important for a marketer to have at least a fundamental understanding of what it means to think about design in terms of how a user is going to interact with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I see people coming off mute. No? All right. Well, if that's it, Cari, thank you so much for making time to chat with us. We really appreciate it. And I hope at some point in the future, maybe we can do this again.
Yeah, that would be great. It was fun.
All right.
And thanks for your questions, everyone.
Thank you so much for being here. Both of you.
Thank you,
pleasure.
Karen.
Everyone have a good night now.
You too.
Take
Good
care.
night.